Can't either.
I'll share that with you.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, we are 4:03, so let's get going. All right.
Okay, cool. So I guess we'll get started. Like Jen was saying. Um, Quick introduction. Shiloh, if you wanna go ahead.
Yeah, I was waiting for that introduction slide. Um, my name is Shiloh. I am one of the third years at USC School of Medicine, Greenville. I did my undergrad at Clemson University. Fun fact about me is growing up, we had like anywhere from 10 to 15 chickens, and we had a rooster that chased my brother around growing up. So it was always funny to watch.
And hey everyone, my name is Maya. I am a third year medical student with the American University of Antigua. Currently, I am in Baltimore, Maryland for my internal medicine rotation. And I guess a fun fact about me is if I am not studying through school, I am hanging out with my dog. I love him so much. So if you ever get the privilege of working side by side with me, then be prepared for some dog pics. But all right, so let's get into our next slide here. So today oh yeah, you're welcome. I do see the chat, so I'm pretty excited about that. But okay, so let's get into what we're gonna kind of chat with you guys about today. We picked a couple topics that both Shiloh and I found to be really important through our step one prep. We'll just go through some mental health things, what we did to kind of make sure that we were at our prime. Um, some info on step one, kind of, why this test is so important. And then we'll go into how we structured our pre-dedicated and dedicated to prepare for step one. So at any point, if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to drop it in the chat. We'd love any opportunity to, interact with y'all. So, and then we are brought to you guys here today by Sketchy. Shout out to them for coming up with such a fun webinar for us to take part in. Super thankful for this opportunity. You know, a lot of you, I'm sure, use Sketchy, and if you haven't had the opportunity to do so, yeah, Sketchy is really great. It turns tough medical concepts into engaging and narrative visual stories that truly, truly stick in your head like glue. Like I still remember some of the first sketches I watched. So it really makes learning a lot more enjoyable and entertaining, and I feel like we remember things much better that way. So, all right, let's get into what step one exam is. So Oh, sorry. Step one exam, as we all know, is like the biggest exam after a traditional US medical student's first 2 years. Um, the content list is provided to you guys on the step one website, but we do have a little screen grab of it right here. So step one tests all of the topics that you see on the screen, starting with general principles, weighing, and at the heaviest, all the way down to social sciences, even though one topic, one section is tested maybe a little bit more by percentage, all of it is still really important. This is just kind of like a guide, I guess, if you're looking to see what's more high yield than the rest, or what kind of questions you could be expecting more of. Shiloh, did you have a little tidbit on that, or? All right, I'll go ahead and move on then. So recently, in the last couple years, step one did switch from a actual 3-digit numeric score to being pass fail. And kind of what this means is, like this exam becomes even more important to, try to pass on your first attempt. It is not the end of the world. It is not the end all if you don't pass step one on the first attempt, but your goal in the long run should be to try to pass it on your first attempt. With that being said, you can look at the percentages and statistics yourself. In 2023, the percent passing was still 90% at your first attempt. It has decreased since 2021 when the score switched from like the numerical score to pass fail. It is still an extremely doable exam. Don't stress. Hopefully, we can guide you guys down the right road and you can get some good tips and tricks to incorporate in your study plan and you can be a part of the 90% to pass your first time.
Yeah.
So,
I definitely want to like point out again like that 90%. I mean, that's still a lot of people. So to kind of reiterate, it is a passable exam. You just don't want to get too comfortable to think that you can kind of just walk in and take it. You still want to give it the respect that it deserves to prepare.
I think Shiloh said that perfectly. This is an exam that definitely deserves a respect, and if you give it to it, then I think if you give in to that respect level, then you'll do just fine. Um, so let's get into kind of some things that we found to be really important while discussing kind of, what Shiloh and I did to prepare for step one. The first big chunk of it that I want to talk about, which I feel like isn't so heavily discussed, is generalized mental health and how important it is, to be able to have a headspace that allows for you to prepare for such a big exam. You're balancing not only worsening anxiety and stress, but you're also trying to fight this, impeding burnout that all medical students eventually deal with. Hopefully, I can give you guys a couple tips and Shiloh can give you guys a couple tips, and you guys can kind of be able to approach that. I'm a firm believer in the fact that, step one isn't just preparing material, knowing these drugs, knowing these bugs, knowing how to apply it all. It's a test of like mental stamina and your ability to be able to focus on every single question and not just focus, but understand what you're reading, why you're reading these words, what the writer wants you to pick up from these words. So being in a clear headspace is so critical. Um, with that being said, some things that we wish we knew before going into the exam to, help us balance this big, mental health, mental headspace challenge is definitely setting a realistic timeline and truly evaluating where you're at to better gauge and not stress yourself out last minute. Um, sorry, I just wanted to double check here. I'm just trying to double check the group, the messages as well. Okay. So what I mean by like setting a realistic timeline, for example, is I gave myself, 3.5 months after a little bit of a break that I took, and I called that my dedicated period. I did take a couple months off after my first few years of school, just because I needed a little bit of a break. Um, I did say that my dedicated is 3.5 months, but it was real slow going for me to get back into it after that break. I truly configured it to where I only had 10 weeks of actual material preparation. So I wasn't sitting there preparing for step one for 3.5 months. Um, so then also, I think it's really important that when you're approaching step one, it is a big exam. There is a ton of material. If you've ever seen the first aid book, you know that it's a thick book. It's nothing you're going to learn overnight. So make sure to accommodate to what you need, right? Maybe my 10 weeks looks different for you. Maybe you're someone who only needs 6 weeks or someone who needs more than that. Between your school and yourself, you should be able to kind of gauge that. So then you want to create a game plan to not only prepare yourself for this exam, but to be able to manage your stress without, becoming too burnt out or too fatigued. And then at that point, when you're so fatigued, your studying isn't practical studying anymore. You're just kind of, reviewing and revising this material, but how much of it is truly sticking. Um, so I highly recommend, studying as many days of the week as you feel like you need to, but making sure you schedule in time for rewards, self-care. For me personally, I looked at rewards as time to go out for coffee and just go for a walk. I live in a little bit of a bigger city, so that was an option for me. Spend some time with friends, take my dog for a walk, spend some time with him. Um, take exercise classes. I love doing that. Gets me out into the world, outside of my little corner of a desk studying. But yeah, whatever it looks like for you, make sure you do something that truly just makes you happy, at least, an hour or two a day. You are better off investing an hour or two into your mental health a day than, trying to push through studying all day long. And then with that being said, I think Shiloh had a couple really good points to share with us.
Yes.
You want to take it away,
Yeah.
Shiloh?
No, definitely to reiterate what was said, you definitely want to take care of your brain. It's your greatest asset during this period. You want to take breaks that allow your mind to rest. And that could be something like taking a walk. Now, not everybody might agree with this, but for me, cleaning my room and just doing something, an activity like that, actually allowed me to kind of detach from studying a little bit. If that's not restful for you, that's perfectly fine. But you definitely want to do something that'll make studying more enjoyable to come back to or easier to come back to. If you hop on social media, you're scrolling, you end up running the risk of doom scrolling. We've all been in that trap. Your brain is getting all these dopamine hits, it gets super stimulated, and I promise you, studying is the last thing you're going to want to come back to. So things like meditation, there's actually been studies that have shown that it can really optimize the way your prefrontal cortex works. So you're improving your cognition, your attention, your memory. It helps you with your discipline, and discipline is something that unfortunately you're really gonna need during this period. And there are things you can do to make it a little bit easier for yourself, like putting your phone in another room, maybe reducing any commitments that you have, or just kind of eliminating them, letting your friends and family know that, hey, I have this huge exam to take, a lot's kind of riding on it, and I really just need to be able to focus on this. And also getting into a rhythm with your sleep and daily routine, you'll find that it's easier for you to stay on track when you kind of have a rhythm going. Another one that I will also kind of put in here, I found that for me personally, when I ate foods that had a lot of carbs in them, oh my goodness, I was so tired. My productivity just plummeted. I did not want to do anything for the rest of the day. I just wanted to sleep. So I found that it was a lot easier for me to eat like smaller servings of like complex carbs and proteins and fats. That could be eggs, avocados. I really like Ezekiel bread. Those are just things for me that really help me kind of have a more sustainable energy level throughout the day. I will say, if you do have specific dietary needs, talk to your doctor before you make any changes. But that's what I noticed helped for me. And I will make a quick note also, if you do have special conditions or diagnoses like ADHD, dyslexia, this exam is already really hard without additional challenges. So if you do find yourself struggling or you think you might have a diagnosis, you want to get help as soon as possible because there are resources available, whether it's medication, whether it's just support, maybe having a simulated testing environment so you can get more acclimated. If you have had a diagnosis for a while and you have a lot of documentation, you can try and get accommodations from the USMLE, but I do want to put a big caveat there because I know from personal experience with friends and people at my school, if you haven't had a diagnosis for a while and you don't have a lot of like documentation, it is really, really hard to get accommodations. That's not to discourage you. You can still make the effort to try, but just know that it could be hard to get those, but there are other options available for you.
Yeah, like Shiloh was saying, it's really important to make sure that you know kind of what you were working with to leading up to, step one in regards to university-based exams, school-based exams is are you going to school and are you, allowed to have that extra time? And if that's something you feel like you're gonna need for step one, then making the earliest approach possible to obtain that proper documentation is something that you should probably be considering. Just a couple points, that people don't necessarily think of prior to scheduling their exam. But talking about scheduling exams, another really big point, when it comes to mental health in this exam is the fact that, often you'll be a week up to the exam and you'll start getting really nervous and in your head, am I ready? Can I do this? Do I know what I'm doing? Um, my little thing is that I've shared with all of my friends who took step one after I did is you don't need to know everything. No one's gonna expect you to know 100% front and back every single thing that is ever covered in medicine. If you do know all of the things, I'm so proud of you. You are killing it. But in the case that you don't, it's okay. If you know 80%, I am sure you will do just fine on step one. Little piece of encouragement, just keep pushing forward. If that last minute you start getting really anxious and you truly feel like maybe I need a couple more weeks, I highly suggest evaluating where you're at. Take that practice test, see how you're scoring, make sure you're trying to simulate that step one environment. I think that'll be the biggest gauge to tell you, yes, you're ready, no, you're ready. Not just that, understanding what's at stake if you do postpone. I know some schools have specific timelines that they require students to follow. So also take that timeline into consideration. And then, like I said, even consider talking to an advisor if you're wondering if you're truly prepared. I'm pretty sure all medical schools have advisors or someone you can talk to who can help you gauge your preparedness. Um, and also, my last blurb of encouragement, I guess, will just be you truly know more than you think you know. You have made it so far in this medical journey. Step one is a beast of a test, but you are a beast of a human and you can do it. So don't get in your head. You have so many people cheering you on. And if you don't, I will gladly cheer you on.
Okay.
So, with that being said, I think we should definitely jump into what you guys are all mainly here for.
I do have
Unless Shiloh has anything else to add on.
Yeah, I do have one more point there. Again, to reiterate that you kind of want to figure out the difference between I genuinely am not ready or I just have like nervous jitters because I think every one of us the day of we're like I'm not ready, just I can't take this test right now. So that's gonna happen. So if you're not ready, if you're genuinely not ready, don't take the exam. If you're not passing practice exams, don't take the exam. But if you are just really nervous, you've been passing, because one of my roommates, smart girl, she was passing all her practice test. If she didn't feel ready, I'm like, girl, you ready? You are ready. And also another thing too is don't compare yourself to others around you. For me, I realized towards the end of my dedicated period, and we'll get more into this, but I just want to make a quick note about this, is you might realize something's working for you, something's not working for you. Don't be afraid to do that. I found myself dropping UWorld towards the end of my dedicated, only because I found that whenever I mastered the sketches, I did a lot better. That was a very bold move. That was not something that probably anyone would really like recommend, but it ended up working really well for me. So don't be afraid to do what works for you if you see that it's working for you. So don't compare yourself.
Right. That's a really good point, Shiloh. Yeah, definitely don't, because comparison will rob you of all of your confidence. Don't do it. As someone who was a heavy, heavy comparer, not worth it. Don't do it. You can do great things on your own. You don't need to compare yourself to other people. But all right, well, Shiloh, you want to take away this little tidbit?
Yeah, so kind of touched on this a little bit. So kind of going into how to structure your dedicated. I think that can be a really challenging beast. It's a little scary to think about, okay, what am I going to do with these next 8 weeks to get ready for this huge exam? And I think it can be broken down. So you have your pre-dedicated, then your dedicated. So during your pre-dedicated, you are still in your classes, you're still taking your exams. This is the time when you really want to, as soon and as early as possible, be really engaged with the material that you are learning. Like you are studying for step one from the day that you get into medical school. You are learning what learning style works for you, whether you're auditory, visual, kinesthetic, read, write. You are figuring out the resources that work best for you, and you are incorporating step one prep early. So that for me meant my resources that I really liked using those. And when you get into your dedicated, that's when you're really going to zero in on those resources, make your schedule, figure out what your needs are. What did you absolutely hate during your blocks? What did you struggle with? What were you strong on? and figuring out what weaknesses you can turn into strengths. As you can see in this really nice diagram, you have your structured review kind of goes down and you really start to incorporate questions more as you kind of progress along. There are lots of techniques that you can use, which I will get into more, but you want to be as active as possible when you are learning, because this is the way you can really get that long-term retention. One of the complaints that often was said during step one is you're kind of like forgetting things as you're progressing through dedicated. And it's so true. Your brain is like just throwing material out and it's like you're fighting against yourself. So even though it'll take more effort and it might feel more overwhelming to embrace studying in a way that kind of like challenges your brain more, you will find that you will absorb, process, and retain that information a lot better and be able to use it when you have questions in front of you. And also you'll feel more confident and comfortable doing this as you progress along, climbing the mountain of medical content. So we can move on.
Oh, sorry, I got carried away. I'm answering a question in the Q&A box. So kind of going from where Shiloh left off, structuring yourself for this exam is super important. We had some quick tips for you guys for pre-dedicated year. I guess this is more of some of the stuff that I did, but some of the things that I super wish I did in the pre-dedicated period coming up to step one that I think would have made my dedicated period much easier. So the big thing is, study with purpose. Make sure you're building a good foundation. Make sure, you're taking those anatomy classes seriously. Make sure you're taking your genetics seriously. Those epi-biostats questions, they do not go away. They will come back and haunt you. I had at least, 6 epi-biostats questions on my step one exam. So that's like important to take into consideration. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in the long run, you will feel like it is a lot and it's important, and, all the points count. So, sorry, lost my train of thought. So figure out what study methods and materials and resources work best for you. I think Shiloh made a good point on that, like, how you want to be preparing. I highly recommend, and what I did that I found to be so useful is, at the end of my first year of med school, I started making notes directly in my first aid book. I hate ink. I hate writing in textbooks. I feel like it's a sin. But I broke I broke my, ways, and I'm super thankful because I made notes in my second semester that I went back and looked at, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was so long ago. I don't even remember it. And it came in such handy when I had to, apply and make these big connections in information further down the road. So that's just something to take into consideration. Um, so then I would also recommend, continuing along the path. You're making notes in your first aid book. When you start doing questions, it could be any book. Also, don't limit yourself to first aid. If you're not a first aid person, fine. I love first aid. It is still with me in rotations. I still use it on the regular. If you get questions wrong and you find yourself getting similar questions wrong, often make note in your first aid book of like what you got wrong, what topic you got wrong. Throw a sticky note in there just so you know to like review and revise that topic. Along the same lines of this is making sure, that you're still studying with purpose, and you're remembering that this whole time you're preparing from your first semester, you're not just preparing for a end of semester exam. You're not just preparing for whatever the next test is. You're preparing for step one. Inevitably, you're preparing for step two and step three. So, keep reminding yourself that you're not even just preparing for step exams, you're preparing to potentially save someone's life one day. So I think taking that approach and mindset is super, super helpful. And then also, keep in mind, like we said before, everybody studies differently, and don't feel intimidated by others and how they're performing. There is no right way to study as long as you yourself, you're learning and making progress in the right direction. But that's kind of like it that I had to say on that, really. I don't know, Shiloh, do you have anything that you wanted to add in?
Yeah, and I think I'll actually go ahead and answer this question because it kind of ties in pretty well to what I would say here. Because I was talking about like, dropping Anki. So I will say if you have not been using Anki since the beginning of like medical school, or if you haven't been like using it prior to dedicated, it's really hard to start then because the reviews pile up. And so you're trying to like do your new cards, your review cards, and all of that. It's not impossible. People who do it. But there is no one way to study for this exam, and it can feel uncomfortable to do something that other people may be saying, this is the way, this is the truth, do it like this. It can be challenging for me, it was definitely a very bold step to drop UWorld, but I felt comfortable making that decision because when I mastered, like I loved sketchy pathophys. When I mastered a sketch, like say the cardiology sketches, when I did a UWorld block, I literally aced it 70s and above. But when I did UWorld blocks material that I didn't know the sketches that well, it was in the lower scores, maybe 30, 40. So I realized I had evidence for me to show me that this is working for me. And it's the better use of my time to make sure I have all of these sketches down pat, like I know like the back of my hand. So when I'm walking into the test, I felt very comfortable because I could literally pull the image up in my head and I could answer a question. So for you, it's figuring out, is this working for me? Is it not? Can I keep using it? Is it sustainable? And just being honest with yourself. I don't think anybody can really answer that question for you, but what I will tell you is there is no right or wrong way to study for this exam. Just figure out what's best for you.
Right. I agree with you on that, Shiloh. And then a tidbit too in regards to Anking. I was never an Anki bro, gal, whatever you want to call them. I never sat there and religiously flipped through Anki flashcards. That's not for me. What I did do is when I was preparing for step one, if I found myself, really forgetting these concepts often, I would either make a card or search like the On King deck for cards that pertain to that topic that I was kind of like missing out on. I didn't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cards, but I did have enough, that those little topics that I felt like I kept forgetting or was getting incorrect, I was able to do better in them because of these cards. I wasn't sitting there for hours. I spent maybe an hour, if so, a day on Anki. So that's my little tidbit on that.
And also
Um,
to sorry,
oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll kind of jump on that too because another question came in. There are many different ways you can use Anki. You don't necessarily have to use it every single day. You can say I'm going to use Anki on the weekends. There are many ways you can use it. There are Anki like decks for like the sketches, like Anki deck for those cards if you wanted to do that. I also, as far as third-party sources go, I really like watching Pathoma and then watching sketches. So I think that paired really well. But again, it's kind of a trial and error for what your learning style is.
And then we can, I will save the rotation question for at the end if that's all right. In case anybody else thinks of any rotations questions, I'll be more than willing to answer those for you guys. But I do definitely want to hop into some information for year two pre-dedicated. Um, I highly recommend, starting early. I think I took my first practice exam right before my fourth semester. Um, just to see, I obviously am missing a whole semester worth of information, but I just wanted to see so far, where am I? What do I need to work on? What needs polishing and shining? And I'd stick to recommending that, you're gonna take this test and not do the best. You're not gonna feel amazing afterwards, but just know that you have a whole other semester left of material to learn. So don't stress yourself out too much over that. It's just kind of giving you a good gauge of where you're at. Um, so I highly recommend to taking into consideration like what have you learned so far that can be incorporated into the material you're still learning. For example, my school, the first year was kind of like anatomy, physiology basics. Second year was pathology, incorporating microbiology, incorporating pharmacology and all of that jazz. So I was always trying to tie in all of these little topics. Um, I'm speaking on this a little bit heavier now because I really wish I did more of this heavy lifting in year two, and it would have made my dedicated period for step one a little bit easier. So just, I guess, a little tidbit, exams that I used and relied on heavily to kind of gauge where I'm at were the NBME exams. You can get them, I think 25 through 31 are available for download. You can purchase them as like an actual graded assessment as well on the NBME website. I highly recommend you at least do that once in your entire prep period. Purchase an NBME exam, have it graded, do it timed, try your best to like simulate a testing environment for yourself. I think you'll really figure out where you're at in regards to that. Make sure you're starting to narrow down your resources once you get closer to the end of year 2. And make sure, please, 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 I know Shiloh didn't really like at the end of her prep period dedicate herself to a question bank, but I think it's important to at least immerse yourself at one point or another in, question banks, making sure that it sounds so silly, but making sure you can process the information fast enough, right? That you're reading the questions, processing them, and knowing what they're asking within a few seconds, because you're not given hours upon hours upon hours to read all of these questions. Sometimes, you're getting to a point where you're running out of time and you're skimming for clues and keys that will get you the answer to the question that you have to answer. So just keep that in mind. So that's why I recommend a question bank. For me, I really, really loved UWorld. I also did, the NBME forms that are available for download. I think there's like 1 through 24 that's available floating around. I did the more updated ones, like 20 through 24, and then I did 25 through 31 as well. Again, you don't need to do that. That's just what worked for me. And then I did UWorld as well. I did a full pass of UWorld, and then I did my incorrect afterwards, which was a lot. I did not get through all of them, so I won't, tell you have to do UWorld 2, 3, 4 times to pass. I don't think that's the case. But
So
other than that, just making sure to narrow down your resources would be super helpful. What were you going to say, Shallow?
I was gonna say that to reiterate, I use the questions that were available on Sketchy. So questions are still absolutely 100% important. I think questions kind of help you figure out how to think and how to use the material in your brain. So you want to at least have some way that you are applying. For me, like learning was always in 3 stages. There was the absorbing the material. There was kind of like the figuring out how to keep the material in my head. So like the retention part, and then there was application part. So all 3 are absolutely important.
Right. And then quickly too, I just realized, I didn't mention my kind of heavy like hitters for preparing for step 1 during my dedicated definitely were UWorld, the NBME banks. My first aid book was my Bible, and it still is to this day. I would go to war for this book, how much I love it. It has all of my notes in it, and I think that might answer the question on taking notes in first aid. I just wrote down anything that I felt like, I needed to remember to study for step, so that way I could go back and review as needed. Prior to taking step 1, I read first aid like an actual book because I had so many notes in it. I used Sketchy, Sketchy Path, SketchyPharm, SketchyMicro were kind of my 3 really big, where I incorporated Sketchy. And I would write notes off of the sketches as well into my first aid. And then I also found myself, yeah, that's pretty much I think that's it that I can think of right now. If anything else comes to mind, I'll let you guys know. But I think Shiloh has some more really good information for you guys, so if you want to take it away.
Yes. And also to kind of touch on notes a little bit, I loved my Bible was my iPad. I would make notes on the sketches because I'm a very visual and kinesthetic learner. And so for me, doing that it was really helpful kind of putting information that maybe was not immediately obvious to me, or if I'm doing a question and I'm getting information from there, I can like add it to my sketches. So I kind of had like a one-stop shop for all of the material that I was learning. So that was great for me. Yeah, so kind of going back to pre-dedicated. So there are many different schools, many different curriculums. one of the complaints that's quite common is, having a curriculum where you are having in-house class exams that are not necessarily board style, that are tailored to high yield information. And that can be a little bit challenging because you're trying to figure out, am I studying for boards or should I study for my class? How do I use my materials? So something that really worked well for me and a lot of the students in my school that did really well is they really focused on like their high yield resources. They did those first because a lot of times they build a better foundation, they teach the material a little bit better. So when you have that framework, it was then easier to kind of add in the in-house material for the exams because they're going to pull from their material. So for me, I loved Sketchy and Pathoma. Pathoma was kind of like my first pass. Sketchy was like my second pass. It was really good to help like solidify and help like retain the information. I also loved Goldjan's audio. I don't know if I said that right. Goldjan's audio lectures because they started kind of teaching my brain how to think in terms of how to approach board style questions. So those are some of the things that I use. I recommend starting using your resources as early as possible because dedicated is going to go by pretty fast, and having a good foundation from the get-go is so, so critical. For me, I didn't start using Sketchy till halfway through my 2 year. And so I found myself kind of having to use be the weekends or the evenings to kind of go back and sort of fill in material that I hadn't used Sketchy for. So I got through about half of Sketchy before I got into dedicated. I don't know what I would have did if I hadn't touched it at all because it was a lot. It's not impossible, but you're gonna thank yourself when you have a lot more material covered leading up to it. Um, so right here, I kind of made this like little image. This is my past tracker. I was not huge on Anki. I tried to use it. I was not very consistent at it. So I used it more as another pass, kind of, which is not really the way it's supposed to be used, but it was just another pass for me. So I had a past tracker, so lectures, my notes, my resources. The way that I went through the sketches is I tried to be as active as possible while going through them. So I'd watch the video, after the video, I kind of close my eyes and say, okay, what happened here? And try to tell myself a story. And then after that, I would do the end of lesson question, and then go back to the image explorer to see, okay, what did I miss? What did I get? And so kind of going through it like that, it helped me really not necessarily need to keep up with Anki because I was being engaged and I was helping my own long-term retention by doing that. And I'll also kind of talk a little bit more about those different learning techniques. But as you can see here, trying to focus on being engaged and getting those passes in, that was really helpful for me. Because we can move on. So this is when I moved into dedicated, this is kind of like one of the sample guides from our school. And it's sort of just, I changed it a little bit for me. I kind of allocated time for each piece of content depending on how much time I needed. So stuff like maybe renal or GI that I knew pretty well because I had just gone over it or I used Sketchy for it. I really only needed one day, but things that I knew I needed to come back to, like cardio or poem or HEMOC, those got anywhere from 2 to 4 days. And so you're kind of having this initial content review heavier in the beginning, and then you kind of want to move more into questions, or for me, I moved into mastering my sketches. So when I was working through the sketches, I would start with, okay, I'm doing cardio. Do I know this content really well? If I did, I would start with end of unit questions and then watch the videos. If I didn't, and I would watch the video and then do that. So kind of testing yourself and then seeing what you missed. That's another way of really engaging your brain. So you're going to keep things longer. So Anki was something that I tried to do, I would study and then try to do the cards and then do my questions and then do the cards for the questions. I ended up finding myself not really keeping up with that. And that's okay if you do keep up with it. But I try to focus on being really active in my recall of the sketches. And then I would do a focus block of the content that I was doing and then a global block or a more of a modified global. So what I mean by that is I would keep a running global block that I would add material that I had learned already or that I was already comfortable with. So the material that I was coming into dedicated with, and as I progressed through dedicated, my global block had more and more material. So I was still keeping up with my space repetition and my retrieval practice because I was still doing those. And the last thing is you don't want to miss free points. So during your last week, you want to make sure that you know your biostats equations. You want to make sure that the areas that are your strengths, you really hammer those down so you don't miss anything. You don't need to know everything to pass this exam, but you want to make sure that the things you know them pretty well. And that you're really just trying your best to keep things in your head, even though your brain's leaking them out as you learn them almost. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about these learning techniques. You want to, so as far as spaced repetition goes, we kind of know most of us will associate that with Anki. Essentially, what it means is reviewing material at increasing intervals. You can use Anki to do that, but there are other ways. You can kind of fit it into your schedule by making like a structure for it with your notes. So you can say, okay, I'm gonna actively review my sketches in a space interval. Or you can say, I'm going to keep a global block of questions going so that I'm still seeing this material again. Retrieval practice, that is essentially pulling material from memory. So again, Anki can do this, or you can do this by covering up your sketches and thinking, okay, what happened here? And you can also, again, your questions. So for me, doing those questions, it kind of incorporated both your space repetition, both your retrieval practice. Um, Interleaving, that's where you're kind of reviewing multiple topics kind of while studying. So you don't just do one, then the other, then the other. You're kind of interleaving them together. So again, having your global block does do that for you. And then linking, it's kind of when you attach, like, is a memory technique that attaches like images to things, help you remember them, and sketchy. So there we go. Everything you need is right there. Um, I want to talk about being strategic with this exam. You don't need to know everything. You can absolutely pass this exam with a strategic way of going through material, understanding what your weaknesses are, understanding how much each topic is weighted. Your performance during didactics to kind of figure out, okay, did I do well here? Did I not do well here? Was he mock something that I'm not gonna get? No matter how hard I try, it's just not sticking in my brain. How you did on practice exams. So you can do multiple practice exams and keep track of your progress to see, okay, am I improving here? Am I not improving here? If you are improving somewhere, then you can keep working on improving that. If you realize that you're not improving somewhere or you're even doing worse, I would say if it's not that high in weight, I would say drop it because time is a crucial element of this, and you don't want to throw time into something that's a sinking hole. For me, that was genetics. I spent time on that and my grades it didn't jump. And I was like, all right, genetics, bye. You're not going to be the reason I fail step one. So how we had to move on. So it's kind of learning yourself, figuring out where you are and being okay with making some of those like uh, bold decisions to step away. And so I just kind of put an image right here so you can kind of see how I kind of track this for myself. So, I mean, that's something you can do to, stay on top of things.
And then really quickly, I just wanted to add on and mention, when it comes to, setting up your schedule to prepare to, Shiloh did a really great job, what techniques you guys should consider incorporating. And they're really important, like recalling information you learned in the past weeks, reviewing really quickly, things you might have been weak on. At the end of the day, it's a points game, right? Like you want to remember and retain as much as you can to get those points, to have a higher score. It's what's important on the test. So I highly recommend, taking into consideration too, uh not just reviewing the tests that you're like doing as well, like your practice tests, making sure you incorporate enough practice tests because they're all structured and built a little differently. I personally did practice tests once a week. There's so many practice exams out there. There's so many free practice exams out there too. I think in February time, AMBOSS usually rolls around a free practice exam as well. So just, keep an eye out for that. And then I also highly recommend, maybe 2 weeks before taking step one. Personally, what I did was 2 weeks before taking my step one, I did the free 120s available. You can download those, the most recent ones, right on the step one website. And going through those, I felt like the concepts that were on those free 120s really helped me gauge kind of how I would be doing on step one. I was able to pass all the free 120s. I passed step one on my first attempt. So there's definitely some correlation with that. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, other than that, make sure you're reviewing things, like Shiloh said, if you're truly not getting something and you feel like you're not going to get it anytime soon, time is of the essence. Don't stress yourself out on that. Make sure you truly know the things that you think you know and that you're making good progress with the overall grade and process.
Yeah. And another thing, just add another suggestion that I thought about too was like you don't want to get hyper focused when you're studying. You have that morning block to content review. You don't want to get hyper focused. If you're like me, you want to like get down every single detail. One thing you can help you is have a document, like a brain dump document where things that you're just like not getting or things that you might want to come back to, just like write it down there and just move on. Say you're studying cardiology and you get to like some random topic, you just like write it down because it's just not sticking. And at the end of the week or the evening, you can come back to it and see, okay, did I get this now? Can I try again? Just kind of have that document there to kind of give you some if you have some anxiety, it's somewhere you can come back and look and see, can I try again? If not, okay. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. I think if you have any other questions, please drop them in the chat. I was putting some links and also sharing our giveaway winner, Danya, and inviting her to say hi. And I think everyone was just saying hi. So hello, thanks for staying until the end. But I will draft another winner because she has not said hi. She's not with us anymore. So this is the winner, Sasmita from PCOM. Let me know if you are here.
Oh, and really quickly, I did want to address the question. I think there was a question about um clinicals. Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me just find it here. Doo-
Okay.
Oh no, I think I lost the question.
I think I remember the question. It was if you guys use Sketchy during rotations. Um,
Yes.
let me get through this real quick. So Sasmita did say hi. So congratulations, you just won the 6 month Sketchy medical subscription. And I also want to let you all know before we dive back into the slew of questions. Um, Although you guys didn't win the giveaway, we do have a really special offer right now. If for those, I think there's like 50% of you who don't have Sketchy right now and you would like to. Here's 25% off all of our plans, 6, 12, and 24 months. If you're taking the spring, you probably maybe just need 6 months. So webinar 25 is the code to use. It will only last until tomorrow, end of day. So make sure you utilize it before it expires. All right. And that is it. I'll bring it back over to Shiloh and Maya for you to answer that question.
I saw a question. So I will say, I did use it in rotation. I think Maya also has a question answers for that question. I did want to quickly answer this question too, saying that how to structure sketchy videos. So to reiterate, there is a guide, and I think it was put in the chat. But also you can, all the videos have timestamps, so you can kind of like calculate the amount of time and how long it takes to get the video, and like kind of create that and put it throughout your day. But the guide here kind of makes that a little bit easier for you. And the retaining, just again, try to walk through the sketches in your head after you watch them, not just kind of keep passing by. Yeah.
And then I saw two questions here in the Q&A. I hope it's all right that I answer here. So Anna asked about the CBSE, which I found to be easier or harder. Honestly, I felt like CBSE was harder for me personally. Um, you know, MBME just has a special way of wording questions for CBSE. So I definitely found it to be a little bit more challenging. Some of my colleagues had opposite opinions. I think though, if you put the work into doing well on CBSE, you will definitely pass step one. There is 100% correlation. Um, that's just, I guess, my opinion on that. And then in regards to how many months ahead of step one did I take my first practice exam? So my school has semester one through semester five. Semester five is kind of like a dedicated period to preparing for CBSE and preparing for step one. I took my first practice exam at the beginning of my fourth semester, so I had a whole semester left of learning still. But it really opened my eyes to, what I needed to work on. So I personally think, the closer, don't wait right up to step one to take your first practice exam. It's okay if you don't know all of the information, just take the score with a grain of salt because there is a lot of information that you already know. So, yeah, I'd suggest probably, at the beginning of whatever your last semester is, would be a good time to just start thinking about it at least. Um, and I guess, were there any other questions or if Shiloh had any other comments?
There are still two questions in the Q&A.
Oh, yep, I'm seeing this now too. Biochemistry and public health, honestly, don't sleep on it because it came up a lot. It is getting more and more and more, pertinent on these exams. And there's been, I think, a really big shift in medicine and all around just, asking questions on these public health topics. How would you respond to patients? What would you say? Um, I would recommend making sure that you understand those topics. And it's like the first few sections in first aid, just make sure you're not neglecting them. Because those are, like I said, points. And at the end of the day, it's a points game. You want to make sure you can acquire as many points possible so that you can guarantee yourself that pass, right?
Yeah, this is a little embarrassing to say because I was a biochemistry major in undergrad and I did so horribly in the biochemistry section of my practice exams. And this is actually a section where I just accepted the score that I was getting and I was like, all right, let's just make sure we pad everything else up because we're not doing so hot here. So I mean, depending on, if you want to, kind of put it towards the end of your studying, you can. I know I would definitely say like your biostats, you might want to put those towards the end because everybody forgets those almost immediately they learn them. So you want those to be fresh. Public health, I will say don't sleep on the communication questions because you might think those are like super like intuitive. You give those actual practice because you want to be able to think the way they want you to think to answer them properly. Um, and that I think the communication are kind of they're tying into like the public health stuff. But as far as saying leave it last, you can, but just not too far back that you don't have enough time if you find you're struggling with it.
Um, okay, so I see a couple more questions in Q&A. Um, to do multiple sketchy passes, I had my favorite sketchies that I remember, and I think I will take to my grave. I will be demented and still remember these sketchies, how engraved into my brain they are. So if I knew, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with the sketchy and I can, reiterate everything that's going on, I just go through the little like where it's the picture and the word and it describes what's going on. I just clicked through that and I felt like that was enough of a refresher. Some sketches I did need to rewatch 2 or 3 times. Embarrassingly, there was some that I needed to rewatch 4 times, but at some point your brain just gets a little like overfilled. I personally would limit myself though to no more than 6 sketchy reviews a day, just so I make sure that I really remember all of the information. That was just me personally, though. Shiloh, I know you just straight up use Sketchy.
for the most part. And actually I know somebody who did really, really well on step one, and they made Anki cards like for like literally the entire sketch. It was like they were like it would be like the title of the sketch, and they would like walk through the whole thing in their brain and then open the card and see like what they missed. So I mean they had these sketches memorized. If you don't, that takes a lot of time. So if there's not enough time and you're dedicated to do that, then you don't have to do that. But that was one way to do a pass. My passes were just close my eyes, walk through it, and then look at it through Image Explorer and see if I got it right or got it wrong. There are many ways to do it. Um, as far as passing CBSE, I just kind of I think it's not that different from just studying regularly as you are studying. Um, I don't know if there's any specific like study this way for CBSE or this way for step one. I think just as you're studying for step one, you are studying for your CBSE.
I'd agree. And then someone also asked about the Melman document. I know that Melman is, I guess, a super controversial topic. Aside from Melman himself, his content, I found it very useful. I did use his arrows document. I found that to be very helpful.
I did too.
But I guess that is it really that I have to say for Melman. Some of his question videos were really helpful in regards to CBSE too. He goes over a lot of like MBME type questions. I found when I reviewed a couple questions and sections I was struggling in with the Melman videos, I found that I was able to approach the questions in a little bit of a different, kind of like different perspective, which helped me get those questions right in the future. If that's a little tip that might help you, definitely try to add it into your prep plan.
Yeah.
Does Sketchy have Anki and Cubing questions aside from videos? Yeah, they have questions associated with every video. I don't think that they have a pre-made Anki deck, Jen. I don't know if that's something you
We
can.
don't, yeah, but we have the Onking deck where we work with the folks there to tag every card. And also for those who are thinking of using us or getting us or currently have subscriptions, we are working on bringing back the custom test feature where we'll have thousands of questions across more simple first order and more higher order questions that you can use to support step prep. So that feature should be out really soon in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't even know that.
Yep.
Uh, let's
Yeah, definitely want to reiterate the arrows document. There were a lot of people in my school who found that very helpful for the mailman. So if you don't do anything else from him, the arrows is a good document.
It is it. I feel like a lot of, step one material is to understanding how multiple entities work at one time. So he does a really good job of kind of putting it all in one page and going through that. So,
I did
oh,
not use boot camp. Um, yeah, and as far as did I a few weeks ahead, that's when I took my first. Well, we had a CBSE several months ahead, but I wasn't prepared, and I really was kind of just clicking through it. Because we were still during our blocks. But we took a CBSE a few months ahead. Um, I can't say for sure which one was most representative of the real thing, but um, yeah.
All right, we are at 5:01, but I think Kylie here has a good question on what is high yield, and maybe we should start, maybe end actually with that question.
Shallow, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I don't think anybody can say for sure whether or not something is high yield or not. From my understanding, it's basically what has higher likelihood of showing up on the exams. You can look at the USMLE content outline and the percentage of breakdowns of the material to figure out, okay, this has a higher percentage than the other one. The resources that are on the market are generally made with the idea of focusing on material that's historically been tested. Same thing with first aid. So they're going to be like, I took the test and I saw material on the exam that I never saw anywhere. So you might not see everything. There might be some quote unquote low yield content, but a lot of it is kind of like guessing and approximation based on what the USMLE does give us. Again, if you know those, if you, whatever resource you use, if you are comfortable with it, again, quality over quantity, you use it really well, you really understand what's going on, you big picture idea what's happening in all these different body systems, you're in pretty good shape.
I agree, yeah. Um, wow, my brain's just not working. Long day today. Um, but yeah, I guess that's kind of, you made a really good point, Shiloh. I don't have anything to add on to that. I don't know where I was going with this.
And that is it. I think we answered all the questions here. Thank you so much, Maya and Shiloh, who are wonderful
Thanks.
ambassadors of Sketchy. So thank you for your work. I hope everyone learned something today, and best of luck for all of you guys who are taking step one in the spring and summer, and there are a few who are beyond that. Best of luck. You guys got this. Hopefully we
Good
will be.
luck, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
You guys will kill it. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Shiloh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, bye everyone.